comfortable. The rain or fire sound is here, and so is tonight's story. Before we begin, where are you listening from? And is this helping you sleep? Subscribe and enable notifications so you don't miss our future narrations. Maya stopped breathing before she stopped moving. Her palm lay flat against the wallpaper, the old floral pattern damp and cool under her skin. From somewhere inside the wall, a sound traveled upward, not a scrape, not a scratch, but a slow, rhythmic drag, like a heavy sack being pulled across dry plaster. She'd been awake since 2:17 a.m., watching the moonlight crawl across the sloped ceiling of the attic bedroom. This was the third night in the Ashworth house on Fillmore Street in Port Townsend, Washington, and the sound had started on night 1. At first, she blamed the pipes. Old Victorian plumbing, shifting timbers. But this was different, too deliberate, too intimate. The dragging stopped, then started again, closer. Maya's fingers trembled against the wall, and when she pressed her ear to the surface, she heard breathing, coming from inside the house, not from outside. She whispered her own name into the silence, a grounding tactic, but the air felt too thick to carry sound. Maya pulled back from the wall and nearly fell down the stairs. She caught herself on the banister, the wood slick with decades of varnish and dust. Her heart hammered against her ribs, but she forced herself to breathe. "You're a grown woman," she told herself. "Freelance graphic designer. You've handled tight deadlines and difficult clients. This was just an old house." She returned to her bedroom, the one with the sloped ceiling and the single dormer window that faced the Olympic Mountains. But instead of climbing back into bed, she swept her phone's flashlight along the wall. That's when she saw it. A hairline crack running vertically from the baseboard to about waist height. It hadn't been there the night before. She knelt down, and the light caught something wedged in the gap. A single strand of dark hair. Not hers, had auburn highlights. She reached to pull it out, but the crack was too narrow. The hair didn't budge. It was as if it had been pulled into the wall from the other side. 3 days earlier, Maya had pulled up to 314 Fillmore Street, feeling a familiar flutter of excitement. She'd needed a change of. On the second morning, Maya sat at the kitchen table with a cup of black tea and scrolled through the reviews again. She'd avoided them at first, wanting the experience to feel fresh, but the dragging sound from the night before had stuck to her like cobwebs. The first review from 9 months ago. Beautiful house, but something felt off. Heard scratching in the attic around 3 a.m. Probably just mice. The second from a year earlier. The walls speak at night. No, I am not kidding. Called the host. She said it was the old plumbing. But I know what I heard. Maya's thumb paused over the third review. It had been deleted. She could see only the first line in the truncated preview. I left early. The room at the end of the hall, the rest was gone. She tried to click, but the page refreshed and the review vanished entirely. She refreshed again. The listing now showed only 5-star ratings, all from the past 2 weeks. Evelyn must have hidden the older ones. Maya set the phone down and stared at the wall. She told herself it was nothing, but that night, Shed found the hair. By the 4th night, Maya had mapped the entire house. It was modesto floors, 4 bedrooms, a parlor, a kitchen, and a small laundry room off the back porch. But there was one door she couldn't open. It was at the end of the upstairs hallway, tucked behind a heavy curtain that looked like it had been nailed to the ceiling. Shed assumed it was a closet, but the lock was a deadbolt, new and modern, contrasting with the antique brass knobs everywhere else. Shed tried her key, a credit card, even a bobby pin. Nothing worked. That evening, she called Evelyn. The host answered on the second ring, her voice smooth as honey. "Oh, that room. We keep it locked for storage. Previous tenant left a lot of junk inside." Maya asked if she could see it. Evelyn's voice tightened. "There's nothing interesting. Just old furniture. I'd rather you didn't liability issues, you know." Maya said okay, because she always said okay. She didn't push, but that night, as she lay in bed, she heard the dragging sound agonally. This time, it was coming from inside that locked room, and it was moving toward the door. The next morning, Maya was determined. She drove to the hardware store on Water Street and bought a flashlight with extra batteries and a small pry bar. She told the cashier she was fixing a loose baseboard. He gave her a strange look, but said nothing. Back at the house, she started with the walls on the ground floor. She tapped along the plaster, listening for hollow spots. Near the back of the staircase, she found one. The sound was empty, echoing. She pressed her ear against it and heard nothing. But when she ran her fingers along the seam, she found a section of wallpaper that had been glued over a cutout. She peeled it back, revealing a square of raw wood-a-patch. Maya inserted the pry bar and levered. The wood splintered and gave way. Behind it was a dark cavity, maybe 3 feet deep, with a smell that made her gag. Old, wet, organic. She shone the light inside. The space was empty, except for a single child's shoe. It was small, brown leather, caked with dirt. She didn't touch it. She backed away and called Evelyn again. No answer. Maya spent the afternoon at the Jefferson County Historical Museum on Water Street. The curator, an elderly man named Gerald, listened to her story with hooded eyes. Ashworth House, he repeated, built in 1897 by a shipwright named Silas Ashworth. He lived there with his wife, Clara, and their daughter, Esther. In 1915, Clara disappeared. No body, no note. Silas claimed she'd run off to California, but the neighbors said they'd heard her screaming through the walls weeks before she vanished. Maya felt the temperature drop. Did they ever find her? Gerald shook his head. The house changed hands many times. Every owner reported strange sounds. One family in the 1950s claimed their daughter started talking to someone in the walls. They moved out within a month. He pulled out a folder of newspaper clippings. One headline from the Port Townsend Leader, 1915. Local woman missing. Husband claims elopement, but whispers tell another tale. There was a photograph of Clara Ashworth, dark hair, long and wavy, eyes deep set. She looked exactly like the strand Maya had found in the wall 3 nights ago. Maya drove back to the house with the museum folder in her lap. She didn't want to go inside, but her laptop was there, her clothes, her car, keys, everything she owned for the week. She sat in the driveway for 10 minutes, watching the front door. The porch light was off. The house looked dead. She finally stepped out, and as she walked up the path, she felt a shift in the air, a pressure change, like a storm rolling in. She unlocked the door and immediately checked the locked room upstairs. The deadbolt was still in place. She pressed her ear to the wood. She backed down the hall and sat on her bed, pulling out the hair shed taken from the wall. It was longer than she remembered. She laid it on the pillow beside her. Then she noticed something. The hair was moving. Not blowing, there was no breeze. It was curling slowly, as if with intent. It formed a loose letter shape, and as Maya stared at it, her breath shallow. Then her phone buzzed. A text from Evelyn. "Sorry, I missed your call. Everything okay?" Maya's fingers hovered over the keyboard, but she couldn't type because the hair on the pillow had shifted again. Now it spelled help. Think about this. If that happened to you, what would you do? Maya didn't reply to Evelyn. She tore the wallpaper off the hallway wall with her bare hands. The floral patterns fell in sheets, revealing old plaster, then brick. The seam was their vertical line, as if a doorway had been sealed. She clawed at the brick, breaking her nails, but one block shifted. She pulled it loose. Cold air rushed out like a breath. Inside the cavity was a narrow space, barely wide enough for a body, and at the bottom she saw the remains of a dress. Blue cotton, faded, stained with something dark. She didn't go any further. She stumbled back and called 911. The dispatcher asked her address. She gave it. "There's a body in the wall," she said. The dispatcher told her to stay on the line, but Maya heard something behind her. A soft sound, like a child's sigh. She turned. The locked door at the end of the hallway was now open a crack. The door swung open slowly, no creak. Maya watched it move, as if pulled by a string. Beyond, it was not a storage room. It was a small bedroom, preserved as if someone had just walked out. A child's bed with a moth-eaten quilt, a wooden rocking horse, and on the floor, a pair of shoes brown leather, matching the one shed found behind the wall. But there was something else. A figure stood in the corner. At first, Maya thought it was a mannequin, its back to her, but it was too short, too thin. A child. She tried to speak, but her throat closed. The figure didn't move. Then it slowly turned its head, not its body. Just its head until a pale face with hollow eyes met hers. It was Esther, the daughter of Silas and Clara, the one who should have been a missing person case from 1915. But here she was, standing in the dark, her lips parted. She spoke one word, not out loud. Inside Maya's skull, Maya fell down the last 3 steps. Her ankle twisted, but she didn't feel it. She scrambled backward on her hands, pushing herself across the foyer floor until her back hit the front door. The child Esther, the ghost, whatever it wasted at the top of the stairs. It hadn't moved, but the air had thickened, and the house groaned around her. She reached for the door handle, but her fingers slipped. The deadbolt wouldn't turn. She twisted again, harder. The lock clicked, but the door didn't open. It was as if something was holding it shut from the outside. The child took one step down, then another. Its feet made no sound. Maya screamed. She threw her weight against the door, and it gave way, spilling her onto the porch. She ran to her car, fumbled the keys, and drove without looking back. She didn't stop until she was on the highway, the lights of Port Townsend fading in her rear view. She called her friend Lee, sobbing. "I don't know what I saw," she said. "I can't go back there." Maya spent the night at a motel in Sequim, 20 miles away. She locked the door, pushed a chair under the handle, and lay in the dark with the lights on. She didn't sleep. At sunrise, she pulled out her phone and checked the Airbnb listing. It was gone, not just removed from her reservations. Entire property had been delisted. She refreshed. The break room clock read 2:47 a.m. But Marcus Webb couldn't stop staring at the dried coffee stain on his wrist. It had been there for 3 hours now, since he'd spilled the cup during the incident in aisle 7. His fingers trembled as he set the mug down, the ceramic clinking against the laminated tabletop. The overhead lights hummed with that specific frequency that always made his temples throb during the night shift. He was 31 years old, an overnight stalker at the Costco in Clackamas, Oregon. And he had never been more afraid of a coworker in his life. The break room door was locked. He'd wedged a plastic pallet jack under the handle. Through the small window, he could see the vast darkness of the warehouse floor. No footsteps, no creaking, just the distant hum of the refrigeration units. He checked his phone. No signal. That was normal down here. But tonight, it felt deliberate. The first time Marcus had noticed something was off was 3 weeks into the job. Felix Nguyen had been working the overnight shift for 8 years. Everyone said that. Felix knew the inventory system better than the daytime supervisors. He could tell you exactly where every item was, what the last price change had been, which pallets were due for rotation. But Felix also had habits, quiet ones. Marcus had been stacking bulk paper towels in aisle 9 when he'd seen Felix standing motionless at the end of the aisle, just staring at the far wall, not at a shelf, not at a product, at the painted cinder block. When Marcus asked if he needed help, Felix had turned with a smile that stretched too wide and said, "Just listening to the building." Marcus had laughed it off. New guys always hear the weird stories. The old-timer who talks to the pallet racks. The woman who alphabetizes the cold medicine by flavor. But that laugh had died in his throat when he'd looked at the wall Felix had been staring at. There was a small hole in the cinder block, just above the baseboard, and inside that hole, something was breathing. Marcus Webb had moved to Clackamas from Eugene 6 months before, chasing a cheaper rent and a fresh start after his marriage had quietly dissolved. He'd been a graphic designer during the day, but the market was saturated, and the bills didn't care about your portfolio. The overnight stocking position at Costco was supposed to be temporary, just until he found something in his field. He'd rented a small house off Highway 212, a 2-bedroom with a leaky faucet and a backyard that backed onto forest land. It was quiet, too quiet sometimes. He'd fill the silence with podcasts, with music, with anything that kept his mind from wandering to the divorce papers, still sitting in a drawer. The night shift had seemed like a good way to avoid being alone with his thoughts. Work when the world sleeps, sleep when the world works. But he hadn't counted on Felix. He hadn't counted on the way Felix would sometimes finish his sentences, or the way Felix would leave notes in his locker that said things like, "Good morning." When Marcus hadn't told anyone he was coming in early, the story Felix had told him, the one that had made Marcus laugh nervously and then stop laughing, was about the member who never left. According to Felix, about 5 years ago, an elderly woman had wandered into the Costco just before closing time, looking for a specific brand of prune juice. The staff had helped her find it, and she paid in cash at the register. But when the closing team did their sweep, they found her shopping cart abandoned in aisle 9. The prune juice was still in the cart. The receipt was tucked into the seat, but the woman herself was gone. Security footage showed her walking into the aisle and then never walking out. They checked every camera angle, every exit, every bathroom stall. She was just gone. The police came. They searched the store. They searched the surrounding parking lot. Felix had told Marcus this story with a straight face while they were both stacking 50-pound bags of rice. "She's still here," Felix had said, his voice barely above a whisper. "She just learned how to be quiet." Marcus had changed his aisle assignment after that. He didn't want to work in aisle 9 anymore, but Felix always seemed to find him anyway. The second incident happened on a Tuesday. Marcus was restocking the frozen food section, his breath fogging in the cold air that spilled from the open doors. The store was silent, except for the mechanical breathing of the refrigeration units. He'd been trying to match a box of frozen pizzas to the shelf tag when he heard the sound. It wasn't footsteps. It was a voice, low and melodic, humming a tune he didn't recognize. He turned. Felix was standing at the end of the aisle, his hands clasped behind his back, his head tilted slightly to one side. He wasn't holding any merchandise. He wasn't wearing a visibility vest. He was just standing there, humming. "Felix," Marcus had said, his voice coming out tighter than he'd intended. "You need something." Felix stopped humming. He smiled that too wide smile. "I was just wondering how you were doing with the rotation schedule. The dairy pallets are due at 4 a.m., but I could handle them if you're struggling." Marcus wasn't struggling. He'd been doing this job long enough to handle the rotation. But something in the way Felix offered made him feel like he was being tested, like Felix was watching to see if he would accept the help, or if he would refuse and prove something. The notes started appearing in his locker 2 weeks in. At first, they were helpful. Don't forget to check the expiration dates on the organic yogurt. The night manager prefers the pallets stacked 4 high, not 5. Marcus appreciated the tips. He wanted to do a good job. He wanted to keep this job until something better came along. But then the notes changed. "You look tired today. Did you sleep well? I noticed you're favoring your left shoulder. Your old injury from college is acting up, isn't it?" Marcus had never told Felix about his college shoulder injury. He'd never told anyone at the warehouse. He'd played baseball for 3 semesters at Lane Community College before a rotator cuff tear ended that dream. He'd mentioned it once, years ago, in a Facebook post that he'd since deleted. He checked his phone. He checked his privacy settings. He even called his ex-wife to ask if she'd ever talked to anyone about it. She hadn't. So how did Felix know about the shoulder? The question gnawed at him during his shifts. He started checking his locker more carefully, started looking over his shoulder, started feeling like the dark aisles were watching him back. Marcus started avoiding the break room when Felix was there. He'd eat his lunch in the employee bathroom, sitting on the closed toilet lid, scrolling through his phone with the volume low. The bathroom was small and smelled of bleach and old drains. The mirror above the sink was cracked in one corner, and the light fixture buzzed like a trapped insect. He told himself he was being paranoid. Felix was just a weird guy. Every workplace had a weird guy, but the weird guy didn't usually know about your shoulder injury. The weird guy didn't usually hum songs you'd never heard before and leave notes that referenced conversations you'd never had. One night, as Marcus was washing his hands, he looked up at the mirror and saw something that made his blood run cold. Written in the condensation on the glass, just above his reflection, were two words: almost there. He wiped the mirror clean with a paper towel. He checked the door. He was alone. He'd been alone the entire time. He called in sick the next day. He stayed home, locked his doors, and tried to convince himself that he was just tired, that the stress of the divorce was finally catching up to him. But when he came back the following night, Felix was waiting for him at the employee entrance, smiling that too wide smile, holding a cup of coffee. "I got you a coffee," Felix said, holding out the cup. Small black, 2 sugars. Same as always. Marcus stared at the cup. He'd never told Felix how he took his coffee. He'd never bought coffee in front of Felix. He'd been buying his coffee at the gas station down the street before every shift, using the self-serve machine alone. "Thanks," Marcus said, taking the cup. He didn't drink it. He set it on the break room table and watched it cool. Felix didn't seem to notice. He sat down across from Marcus, his hands folded neatly on the table, and started talking about the inventory shipment due the next morning. His voice was calm, pleasant, perfectly normal. But Marcus couldn't stop staring at the coffee cup. The lid was on wrong. The seam of the lid was misaligned with the rim, and there was a small smear of what looked like pink lipstick on the edge. Felix didn't wear lipstick. No one in the overnight crew wore lipstick. Marcus waited until Felix left for his aisle assignment. Then he dumped the coffee down the drain. He watched it swirl away, black and bitter, leaving a thin residue on the stainless steel. He rinsed the sink 3 times. He still felt like he hadn't washed it clean. The night manager, a heavy-set man named Dale, who smelled like menthol cigarettes and old coffee, had noticed Marcus's jumpiness. "You look like you've seen a ghost, kid," Dale had said, clapping him on the shoulder. "Felix getting to you." Marcus had tried to play it cool. "Just tired. Long week." Dale had nodded, but his eyes were knowing. "Felix is a strange bird, I'll give you that. But he's been here 8 years. Never caused any trouble. Just keeps to himself, mostly. You'll get used to him." But Marcus didn't want to get used to him. He wanted to understand him. He started staying late after his shifts, just a few minutes at a time, watching Felix from a distance. Felix would finish his aisle work, then walk to the back of the store, to the cavernous storage area where the pallets were stacked 20 feet high. He would stand in the center of the concrete floor, perfectly still, and just listen. Marcus watched him do this for 5 minutes, 10 minutes. Felix never moved. He never blinked. He just stood there, head slightly tilted, like he was waiting for something to speak to him. Think about this, if that happened to you. How long would you watch before you walked away? Marcus didn't walk away. He stayed. He crouched behind a stack of bulk toilet paper, his knees aching, his breath held. Felix stood in the center of the storage area for exactly 18 minutes by Marcus's phone timer. Then slowly, he turned his head. Not his body, just his head. He turned it directly toward Marcus's hiding spot, his eyes gleaming in the dim light. And he smiled, not a wide smile, a small one, a knowing one. Marcus didn't run. He couldn't. His legs had locked up, his muscles frozen. He watched Felix walk toward him, his footsteps silent on the concrete, until he was standing just a few feet away. "You should get some rest, Marcus," Felix said. His voice was soft, almost gentle. "You have a long day tomorrow. The morning crew is coming in early for the inventory count." Marcus nodded. He couldn't speak. He stood up, his legs shaking, and walked past Felix toward the employee exit. He didn't look back. He heard Felix's voice behind him, barely carrying across the empty space. "I'll see you tomorrow." It wasn't a question. It was a promise. Marcus didn't go home that night. He drove to the public library in Oregon City and sat in the parking lot until the sun came up, using the free Wi-Fi to search Felix's name on his phone. Felix Nguyen, Portland, Oregon. Nothing unusual. Felix Nguyen, telecommunications. Felix Nguyen, real estate. But then he tried a different search. Felix Nguyen Costco, Clackamas incident. A news article from 9 years ago appeared. It was a short piece, barely 4 paragraphs, about a disturbance at a Costco in Beaverton. A man named Felix Nguyen had been found wandering the aisles after hours, disoriented and confused. He'd told police that he was looking for his brother who had worked at that location, his brother who had disappeared from the store 6 months earlier. The article didn't give many details. The first thing I noticed was the smell old wood, pine resin, and something underneath, like stale breath. The second thing was the note. It lay on the pillow beside me, folded once, the paper yellowed at the edges. I hadn't put it there. I was alone in the cabin. Maya Chen, 29, freelance graphic designer from San Francisco, driven 6 hours to Bishop, California, for a week of solitude. A remote work retreat, I told friends. A chance to breathe. But this note was not part of my plan. I unfolded it with trembling fingers. 3 words, written in small, neat handwriting. I know you're here. The air went cold. I looked at the window. The curtains were open. I didn't remember opening them. Outside, the Sierra Nevada mountains stood silent, pine trees dark against a pale sky. I told myself it was a prank. Maybe the previous guest left it. Maybe the cleaning crew. But my name wasn't on the booking. No one knew I was here. No one should have known. I threw off the blanket and crossed the hardwood floor barefoot. The cabin was small 1-bedroom, a living area with a stone fireplace, a kitchenette. Id booked it through a site, paid with a credit card, received a code for the lockbox. Standard procedure. But when I tried to turn the deadbolt, it didn't budge. The key turned halfway and stuck. I pulled, twisted, pushed. The lock felt gummed up, like someone had jammed something inside. I checked the back door. Same problem. Both deadbolts were useless. I stood in the quiet kitchen, listening to the hum of the refrigerator. My phone had 1 bar of signal. I called the host's number listed on the booking confirmation. It rang 7 times before a voicemail picked up a woman's voice, recorded, flat. You've reached Linda. Leave a message. I'll call you back within 24 hours. 24 hours. I left a message, my voice calm even as my pulse hammered. Then I tried my car. The rental sedan sat in the gravel driveway. Driver's door unlocked. I turned the key. The engine clicked once, twice, then nothing. Dead battery. No jumper cables. No close neighbors. I was trapped. Let me rewind. I booked this cabin 2 weeks after a breakup, the kind that leaves you hollow, questioning everything you thought you knew. My flaw, the one my ex pointed out in the last fight. I trust too easily. I give people the benefit of the doubt, even when every sign says don't. So when I saw the listing for secluded pine retreat, peaceful mountain escape, with 5 stars and reviews praising the quiet. I didn't hesitate. Bishop is a real town, gateway to the Eastern Sierra, a place where the desert meets the mountains. It'd been once before, years ago, on a college road trip. I remembered the vastness. I wanted that vastness now, to swallow my sadness. The host, Linda, sent a warm message. The cabin is fully off-grid, but has solar power and Starlink. Make yourself at home. There's a guest book inside. No mention of cameras. No mention of a note. I arrived on a Tuesday afternoon, unpacked, opened my laptop, and started working on a branding project. The first night was quiet. Too quiet. I slept deeply, but I woke up with scratches on my arm. Small red lines, like from a fingernail. I blamed the cheap sheets. By the second day, I noticed the speakers. 3 of them, 1 in the bedroom, 1 in the living room, 1 in the kitchen. Cheap white plastic, unbranded, plugged into outlets behind furniture. I hadn't seen them in the listing photos. I tried to unplug the one in the bedroom, but the cord ran behind a heavy dresser. I couldn't move. Instead, I covered it with a towel. I did the same for the living room unit. The kitchen one, I simply removed the plug from the wall. But that evening, while I was making soup, I heard a click from the living room. The towel had fallen off the speaker. The red light was on. I told myself it was faulty wiring. I tucked the towel tighter, pushed the speaker face down. Then I sat down to eat. My phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number area. Code 760, local. It read, "The mountain has eyes." I stared at the screen. A wrong number, I thought. A prank. I typed back, "Who is this?" No reply. I called the number. It rang once and went to a disconnected tone. That night, I double-checked all the locks. Still jammed. I pushed a chair under the doorknob. I slept with the lights on. The third day, I decided to explore the cabin more thoroughly. I needed to find something to explain the note, the text, the deadlocks, something rational. I opened every drawer. The kitchen had mismatched utensils, a half-empty bottle of cooking oil, a packet of instant oatmeal with an expiration date from 2 years ago. The bedroom dresser held a spare blanket and a Bible, the pages stiff, but the nightstand beside the bed, the one it ignored, had a drawer that stuck. I wrenched it open. Inside lay a notebook, leather-bound, with a cracked spine. I lifted it out. The first page was blank. The second page had a list of names. Each name had a date next to it. Some were crossed out. One name was circled in red ink. Maya Chen. Beside it, the date was today's date. I dropped the notebook as if it were hot. My breath came shallow. I picked it up again, forcing myself to read further. The names before mine, 8 of them, all had dates ranging from 6 months ago to last week. The crossed-out ones had no dates at all. I didn't know what that meant. I still don't. I took a photo of the notebook page. I sent it to my sister in San Francisco. No reply signal was flickering. I tried to call 911. The call failed. The cabin's location was remote, and the mountains blocked cell towers. I remembered the Starlink terminal on the roof. I opened my laptop. Connected to the Wi-Fi, it worked. I searched the address of the cabin on Google Maps. The satellite view showed a clearing, a single structure, and a dirt road leading to the highway. But when I zoomed in, I saw something else. A second building, smaller, about 50 yards east of the cabin, hidden by trees. I hadn't noticed it when I arrived. I grabbed my jacket and stepped outside. The air smelled of pine and snowmelt. I walked through the trees, following a faint path. The building emerged a shed, wooden, with a padlock on the door. The lock was new, shiny. I tried to peer through the gaps in the boards. Inside, I saw something move. A shadow, not human-shaped, just a darkness that shifted when I blinked. I backed away slowly. I did not go back to that shed. That night, I couldn't sleep. I sat in the living room with all the lights on, a kitchen knife in my hand, the notebook open on the coffee table. I read the names again. Some I recognized from reviews of the cabin, positive reviews. 5 stars, mentioning how peaceful the stay was, how quiet. I checked the bathroom, the closet, under the bed. I finally drifted off around 3 in the morning, curled on the couch. I woke to a pressure on my chest, not physical, a weight in the air. The lights were off. The room was dark, except for a sliver of moonlight from the window. And there, at the foot of the couch, stood a figure, tall, too tall, its shoulders brushing the ceiling. It had no features, only a deeper blackness shaped like a man. I couldn't move. My mouth wouldn't open. The figure stood still, watching me. I don't know how long. Then it stepped sideways into the shadow of the wall and vanished. The lights flickered back on. I was shaking, drenched in sweat. I didn't sleep again. The 4th morning, I called the host again. This time, a woman answered. Her voice was calm, professional. Linda, this is Maya Chen. I am a guest at your cabin, and I need to leave. The locks are jammed. My car won't start, and there's someone or something here. There was a pause. Then Linda said, I'll send someone out this afternoon. Stay inside until they arrive. The line went dead. I didn't trust her. I started searching the cabin for anything I could use as a weapon, a tool, a way out. I pulled up the corner of of the area rug in the living room. Underneath, a square cut in the floorboards. A trapdoor. I lifted the ring and pulled. The door opened onto a shallow crawl space. It smelled of earth and rot. I grabbed my phone flashlight and shone it down. I saw boxes, old clothes, and a stack of photographs. I climbed down. The photographs were of people. I didn't recognize families, couples, lone travelers, all smiling in front of the cabin. On the back of each, a date written in pencil, and a number. The most recent photograph showed a man in his 30s, standing by the same front door I used. The date was 2 weeks ago. The number was 0. I shuffled through the photographs. There were dozens, maybe 50, all guests of this cabin. Each one had a number on the back. Most numbers were between 1 and 10. A few had higher numbers, 15, 20, 30. The man whose number was 0, his face was scratched out with a black marker. I pulled out my phone and took pictures of everything. Then I noticed a piece of paper taped to the underside of the floorboards above me. I peeled it off. It was a handwritten note, different handwriting than the one on my pillow. If you're reading this, you have 2 days. The host is not who she says. Do not trust the quiet. Do not sleep. There is a path behind the shed that leads to the highway. Take it. Leave everything. The paper had no signature. I crawled out of the crawl space. Dust caked on my clothes and stood up. I heard a soft hum from the kitchen. The smart speaker id unplugged was back on. Its red light blinked steadily. I ripped the speaker out of the wall. The cord came loose, and the device clattered to the floor. I stomped on it. The plastic cracked. The red light went out, but I felt no relief. I went to the other speakers. The one in the bedroom id covered. The one in the living room. Both were still plugged in. I pulled them down and smashed them. Then I searched for hidden cameras. I found one in the smoke detector in the living room. A tiny lens, perfectly aligned. I broke it. I found another in the bathroom vent. A third in the bedroom light fixture. I destroyed them all, my hands shaking. When I finished, I stood in the middle of the cabin, breathing hard. The silence was deeper now. No hum of electronics, only the wind outside. Think about this if you found yourself trapped in a place where someone had been watching you, recording every moment. Would you stay to find answers or run blind into the woods? I had to decide. The note from the crawl space said there was a path behind the shed, but the shed held that shadow. I chose the shed. I grabbed a flashlight from my car and walked to the shed. The padlock was gone. The door hung open an inch. I pushed it. The hinges groaned. Inside, the shed was larger than it appeared from outside. Shelves lined the walls, holding tools, camping gear, and boxes of old electronics. But the center of the shed was cleared. On the floor, a circle had been drawn in white chalk. Inside the circle, a single item lay: a photograph. My photograph, the one from my ID on the booking site. I stepped closer. The flashlight beam caught something else. On the back wall, a map was pinned. A map of Bishop with the cabin marked, and then lines radiating out, connecting to other locations. Gas stations, motels, trailheads. Each location had a date, and each date had a name crossed out. I realized then that this wasn't just about me. This was a history, a pattern. The cabin was a trap, a hunting ground, and the figure I'd seen, the shadow, was not the hunter. The hunter was the host. The shadow was something else. The sound started at 2:17 a.m. I know the exact time because I'd been staring at the clock's red numbers, watching them change, waiting for sleep that refused to come. It was a scratching noise, but not like a mouse in the walls. It was deliberate, something with intent. I live alone at 731 N.W. Leith Lane in Hillsboro, Oregon. A quiet suburban street where the loudest thing that ever happens is a neighbor's dog barking at the mailman. That night, I pressed my back against the hallway wall, the kitchen knife cold in my hand, and I asked myself if I was losing my mind, because the scratching was coming from inside the spare bedroom closet, the one I never open. My palm slicked against the brass. I'd lived in this house for 11 months, and in that entire time, I had never opened that closet door. The realtor told me it was a linen closet, but when I moved in, the shelves were empty and the door stuck a little, so I left it. You don't think about the things you stop seeing. The door became part of the wall, just another surface in a room I didn't use. But now, with that scratching sound still going, I had to know. I twisted the knob. The lock clicked. The door didn't budge. Not because it was stuck, because something on the other side was holding it shut. My name is Nora Chen. I am 43, a senior cataloger at the Washington County Historical Society. My job is quiet, orderly, predictable. I spend my days documenting the past, filing stories away in acid-free boxes where they can't hurt anyone. I am good at it because I like control. I like knowing what happened and when. That's probably my flaw. I need things to fit. Puzzles bother me. Loose ends keep me awake. And that night in late October, after I finally forced myself back to bed and the scratching stopped at dawn, I told myself it was just the house settling. Old pipes, a branch against the siding, anything but what it it sounded like. Fingernails dragging across wood from the inside. The next day, I called a handyman. His name was Gary, and he came by on a Tuesday afternoon with a tool belt and the kind of cheerful confidence that made me feel ridiculous. He jiggled the closet door, shrugged, and said the frame had probably warped from humidity. He sanded the edge, oiled the hinges, and pushed it open. Inside, 3 bare shelves, white paint, a faint smell of dust. Nothing else. Gary laughed and said, "Guess you scared yourself, Mom." I laughed too. I gave him $40 and made a mental note to get more sleep. But that night, I locked the bedroom door and I left the hallway light on. It came back the next night. Same time, same sound, but now it was different. It wasn't just scratching anymore. It was a voice. Not words, not exactly. More like a low, wet murmur. The kind of sound you might hear if someone was trying to speak through a mouthful of water. I lay frozen in bed, my phone in my hand, my finger hovering over 911. But what would I say? There's a noise in my closet. They'd send a car, find nothing, and it'd be the crazy lady on Leith Lane. So I didn't call. I pulled the covers over my head like a child and waited for morning. The murmuring continued until 4:47 a.m. I checked the time. I bought 3 cameras, a motion sensor, a doorstop alarm. I set them up that afternoon, feeling both stupid and desperate. I aimed one camera directly at the closet door. I put another in the hallway. The third went in my bedroom, pointed at my own bed. If something was happening inside my house while I slept, I wanted proof. That night, I went to bed early, exhausted, the cameras recording on a loop. I woke up feeling worse than when id closed my eyes. The footage showed nothing. The closet door stayed shut. The sound file was empty, but I had scratches on my forearm. 3 parallel lines, fresh and red, like someone had dragged their nails across my skin while I wasn't watching. I measured the scratches, each one exactly 4 inches long, spaced a 1/4 inch apart, too precise to be accidental. I didn't sleep that night. I sat in the living room with all the lights on, drinking black coffee, watching the hallway. At 2:17 a.m., the spare bedroom door creaked open on its own. I didn't go check. I stayed on the couch, gripping the armrest, and I listened to the sound of something dragging itself across the hardwood floor inside that room. It sounded wet. By morning, the door was closed again. I called in sick to work for the first time in 6 years. I went to the one place I trusted, the records. I spent 3 hours digging through old property files for 731 and W. Leith Lane. The house was built in 1973. The original owner was a man named Harold P. Meeks, who lived there until 1985. Then the house sat empty for almost a decade. I found a property transfer notice from 1987 that mentioned structural damage due to fire, but the house wasn't burned. Nothing in the history mentioned a fire. I dug deeper. I found a police report from 1986, a missing person case. A 7-year-old girl named Emily Meeks, never found. Last seen in her bedroom at 731 and W. Leith Lane. Her closet door was open. The report said it was open. Emily Meeks, 7 years old, disappeared on the night of October 14th, 1986. Her mother said she put her to bed at 8 p.m. When she checked at 10, Emily was gone. The window was locked from the inside. The front door was bolted. The only thing out of place was the closet door, standing wide open. Police searched the entire house. They tore apart the walls. They dug up the backyard. The case went cold. The parents divorced. The father, Harold, stayed in the house until 1995, when he was found dead in the spare bedroom. Cause of death, heart failure. But the coroner's notes mentioned something odd. His fingernails were worn down to the quick, consistent with prolonged scraping against a hard surface. The report said. I read that line 7 times. Consistent with prolonged scraping against a hard surface. Harold Meeks had scratched at something until his nails wore away. The same thing Id heard in my walls. The same thing Id felt on my skin. I closed the file, paid for the copy, and drove home in a haze. The sun was setting. The house looked innocent from the street. But when I walked in, the hallway door to the spare bedroom was open. I hadn't left it that way. I stood in the entryway, keys still in my hand, and I heard it again. The scratching, louder now, coming from inside my bedroom closet, the one I used every day. Think about this if that happened to you. What would you do? I recorded myself sleeping that night. I needed to see. At 2:17 a.m., my eyes opened on the footage. But they weren't my eyes. They were wider than normal. Too wide. I sat up in bed, moved to the closet, opened the door, and stepped inside. Then I closed the door behind me. I stayed in there for 3 hours. When I came out, around 5:30 a.m., I walked back to bed and lay down like nothing happened. I didn't remember any of it. I watched the video 10 times. I still don't remember it. But my feet were dirty, and my fingernails had dirt under them. I ripped up the carpet in my bedroom closet the next morning. I found plywood. I pried it up with a crowbar, my hands shaking, the wood splintering. Beneath it was a concrete slab. I almost stopped, but I noticed a hairline crack running along the edge, a seam that didn't match the rest of the foundation. I followed it with my fingers. It formed a rectangle, about 3 feet by 3 feet. Somebody had cut this slab and replaced it. I found a hammer and chisel. It took me 4 hours to break through. When I did, the smell hit me first. Something older than damp earth. I shone the light down into the darkness and saw the top of a staircase. The house had a basement. No one knew about it. Not the realtor, not the city records, not even the historical society files. But under my bedroom closet, a staircase led down into the dark. The steps were stone, old, slick with moisture. I stood at the top for a long time, the light trembling in my grip. Then I went down. The air got colder with each step. At the bottom, a narrow corridor stretched about 20 feet, ending in a wooden door with a rusted iron latch. I could hear something on the other side. Slow, wet, ragged breathing. The kind of sound a person makes when they've been waiting a very long time. I reached for the latch, and then the breathing stopped. I didn't open it. I stood there, hand frozen, and I listened to the silence. It was worse than the breathing, because the silence felt deliberate, like something on the other side of that door was also listening, waiting to see what I would do. I backed away, step by step, keeping the light aimed at the door. When I reached the stairs, I turned and ran. I climbed out, threw the plywood back over the hole, dragged the carpet across it, and slammed the closet door shut. I called a locksmith and had him install a deadbolt on that closet door. He asked why. I told him I had expensive jewelry. He didn't believe me. Neither did I. For 3 days, I didn't go near that room. I slept on the couch. I left the television on. I called my mother twice, something I never do. But on the 4th night, I woke up on my feet. I was standing in the hallway, facing the spare bedroom. The deadbolt was on the floor, still locked, screws scattered like confetti. The closet door was open. I walked toward it, my body moving without my permission. My mouth open, but nothing coming out. I stepped inside the closet. The plywood was gone. The hole gaped open like a mouth. I heard that breathing again, and a voice, a little girl's voice, thin and hollow, rising from the dark. Did you come to play? The voice came from the basement, but the light did too. A pale, bluish glow, pulsing like a heartbeat, rising from the bottom of those stone stairs. I couldn't stop my legs. I took the first step, then the second. The walls were wet now, sweating, and the smell was thick enough to taste. I reached the bottom of the stairs. The wooden door was open. The room beyond was small. maybe 10 feet square, with a dirt floor and walls made of rough stone. In the center, a small wooden chair. On the chair, a child's dress, yellow with white flowers, and nothing else. But the light was coming from the far wall, where someone had painted something, hundreds of them, and in the center, a handprint, a child's hand. I don't know how long I stood there. Time didn't work the same way in that room. But eventually, I heard footsteps behind me. I turned. No one was there, but the dress was gone, and the symbols on the wall looked darker. I touched the handprint. It was wet. I looked at my own hand, and there was red on my fingers. Not paint. I left the basement. I sealed the hole with cement mix and rebar. I sold the house 2 months later at a loss. The couple who bought it had a 7-year-old daughter. I didn't tell them anything. I told myself I had no proof. I moved to an apartment in Beaverton. 3rd floor. No closets with deadbolts. No basements. I told myself it was over. But last week, I found the listing online. The house at 730 1 and W. Leith Lane sold again. The new owners are renovating. The photos show the spare bedroom stripped down to the studs. And there, in one of the images, you can see the closet door. It's open. The photographer. Thank you for spending part of your night with us. If you enjoyed the story, we'd appreciate a comment, a like, and a subscription to the channel. And please share this video with your friends who enjoy calm horror and rain sounds. Rest well and good night.